if you want to read for 8 hours a day, the absolute worst thing you can possibly rely on is your own motivation.
It sounds completely backward, doesn't it? I mean,
Right.
we are so culturally conditioned to believe that willpower is just, the only engine capable of driving long-term success.
We really are. We treat willpower like this muscle that some lucky people are just born with,
Right.
and the rest of us are constantly flexing it until it tears. You look at someone who achieves massive things over decades, and society says, well, they must have incredible drive.
Exactly. But today, we are tearing down that myth entirely.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are exploring a truly remarkable collection of personal essays written by a man reflecting on a lifetime of corporate experience, intense self-education, and physical habit building.
And we are doing this because of a very specific and frankly just brilliant question we received.
Yes, so we received a message from a listener who is actually in middle school right now.
Which is awesome.
It is. And to that listener, thank you so much for writing in. You pointed out that the author tackles so many incredible decades-long challenges simply by, continuing, by persevering.
Right. And your specific question was, could a middle school student replicate this? Like, is the secret sauce just motivation?
I love that a middle schooler is already asking this kind of systemic question.
It really is a fantastic premise, because the short answer is yes, absolutely, you can replicate this.
But the how is where we get into the really fascinating mechanics of human behavior.
Oh, absolutely. The author's life is essentially a masterclass in behavioral design, even though he might not have always called it that at the time.
We are going to look at the raw physical reality of habits. We're going to explore psychological tricks, how your brain actually perceives time, and how you can engineer your environment.
So that you never have to rely on a volatile emotion like motivation ever again.
Because what the author proves through decades of trial and error is that relying on motivation is basically a fool's errand.
He actually introduces this concept early on by talking about an acquaintance of his, someone he openly describes as a genius.
Okay, a genius.
Yeah. And this is a person who reads for 8 hours a day, every single day.
Right, and when you or I hear, reads for 8 hours a day, the immediate mental image is someone sitting at a desk, sweating, gritting their teeth.
Forcing themselves to turn the page.
Exactly. We imagine this monk-like discipline.
But the author makes a really crucial observation about this genius.
Right.
He realizes there's absolutely no forced effort happening.
None at all.
None. The reading is as natural as breathing. The author uses the specific term for this. He calls it routinization.
Building a pure routine.
Exactly. The genius doesn't wake up in the morning, stare at the ceiling, and try to summon the sheer willpower to read for 8 hours.
Okay, I have to push back a little here.
Sure.
Because that sounds great in theory, but isn't routine just motivation that has been running for a long time?
Yeah.
Like, you still need the willpower to start the routine in the first place, don't you? You're just renaming it.
It's a fair question, but there is an actual mechanical difference. Let me frame it this way. Do you need motivation to brush your teeth in the morning?
No. I mean, I just walk into the bathroom and do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't sit on the edge of your bed wrestling with the pros and cons of dental hygiene.
Right.
The cognitive effort has been completely removed because the decision has been removed.
Oh, the decision.
It is an automated sequence triggered by waking up. The genius who reads 8 hours a day has simply woven the act of reading into the fabric of their existence in the exact same way.
So they have bypassed the decision-making center of the brain entirely.
Precisely.
The removal of the decision. That is the key. And this brings us to one of my absolute favorite practical examples from the essays.
The running story.
Yes. It completely dismantles the idea that you need motivation to start a difficult task. The author shares a story about starting a running habit in his mid-60s.
Right. And his overarching goal here is incredibly long-term and emotional.
Right. He wants to maintain his cardiovascular health so that 20 years in the future, when he's in his 80s, he can go on a date with his granddaughter.
It's a beautiful goal. But here is the critical part, especially for our middle school listener. He didn't actually start his daily habit with the grand motivation to run.
No. If he had woken up on a freezing January morning and said to himself, I must go run 3 miles right now so I can be healthy 20 years from now,
His brain would have rejected it entirely.
what would have happened? Yeah, exactly.
The sheer distance between the action running in the freezing cold and the reward a date 2 decades away is just too vast.
Evolutionarily speaking, our brains prioritize immediate comfort, right?
Absolutely. The amygdala which processes immediate threats and discomfort, would be screaming at him to stay under the warm covers,
So relying on motivation in that moment requires overriding basic human biology.
which is exhausting.
So he bypasses the biology. He tricks himself.
He doesn't decide to run.
He wakes up, and his only goal, the only decision he allows himself to make, is to step outside to feel the morning sun.
That's it.
That is it.
Think about the massive reduction in friction there.
Right.
Go run for 30 minutes is a highly taxing, high friction decision.
But open the front door and stand on the porch.
Is a near zero friction decision.
But it's January. It's freezing cold.
Yeah.
So he steps out onto the porch, the freezing air hits him, and what happens?
His body naturally, almost involuntarily, starts to jog just to generate heat.
The environment dictated the action, not his internal willpower.
It is a brilliant piece of behavioral design.
Yeah.
He manipulated his physical reality to initiate momentum.
Right. But the actual perseverance, the real magic, happens a few minutes later.
Yes, the 2-minute wall.
Let's talk about that, because the author notes that roughly 2 minutes into his run, his body screams at him to stop.
His lungs are burning, his legs feel heavy.
So let's talk about what's actually happening there physiologically, because society tells us that when things get hard, it means we lack drive.
Right.
When your lungs burn at minute 2, the narrative in your head is usually, I'm out of shape, I don't have the motivation for this, I should just go home.
Which is a complete misinterpretation of what the body is actually doing.
Okay.
Yes. At the 2-minute mark of any sudden cardiovascular exercise, your body is undergoing a massive systemic shift.
Okay.
You are transitioning from anaerobic respiration, burning stored energy in the muscles, to aerobic respiration, which requires your heart to pump massive amounts of oxygen to the tissues.
So your body literally hasn't caught up to the oxygen demand yet.
Exactly. You are literally in oxygen debt.
So the burning lungs are literal chemical alarms. It has nothing to do with your character or your willpower.
Precisely. It is a biological transition phase.
Yep.
But because it is deeply uncomfortable, this is the exact threshold where most people quit.
They feel the pain, they interpret it as a lack of motivation, and they make the decision to stop.
But the author doesn't make a decision there. He practices something incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
He delays the decision point.
Delays.
While he is in the middle of that 2-minute agony, he refuses to entertain the question of, should I stop or keep going?
Wow.
He tells himself, I'm not allowed to decide right now. I will just keep jogging to that specific corner up ahead, which is at the 3-minute mark.
And by the time he reaches that corner at the 3-minute mark, the physiological shock has subsided.
The aerobic system has engaged, the blood is flowing, the oxygen is being delivered.
So the intense scream of the first 2 minutes is completely gone.
Yes. And then, and only then, does he allow his brain to make a choice.
And even then, look at how he frames the choice. He doesn't ask, do I run or do I go home?
Right. The decision at the 3-minute mark is, do I turn left for the short 6-minute route, or do I turn right for the longer 8.5-minute route?
It's masterful. It assumes the running is already a given, left or right.
He has completely hijacked his own decision-making apparatus. He moved the decision point past the zone of maximum biological resistance.
Because if you try to decide whether to run while your lungs are on fire at minute 2,
Your brain will choose safety and warmth every single time.
but by deferring the decision to minute 3 and changing the parameters of the choice, he just rides the momentum.
It requires significantly less energy to stay in motion than it does to initiate motion from a standstill.
Right.
This is basically basic physics applied to cognitive behavioral therapy. He notes in the essays that he used to try running the normal way, relying on motivation.
And how did that go?
He would get stuck on the should I run today question while sitting on his couch, and he inevitably quit within a week.
Of course.
Shifting the decision point was the mechanism that allowed him to continue for years.
Okay, so let's take this incredibly adult scenario. A 60-something man managing his cardiovascular health and apply it directly to our middle school listener.
Perfect.
Because the listener asked if they can replicate this. Imagine you're a middle schooler and you know you need to study for final exams.
Right.
Society, your teachers, your parents, they all tell you that you need the motivation to sit at your desk for 3 hours.
Which, for a teenager, is a terrifying prospect.
Right.
Standing in the kitchen, looking down the hallway at your bedroom door, and trying to make the decision, I'm going to go in there and focus intensely for 3 hours that requires a monumental expenditure of willpower.
The brain rejects the massive energy cost before you even take a step.
It's the exact same mechanism as staring out the window at the January frost
Yeah,
and deciding to run 3 miles.
exactly. So, how do we apply the author's strategy here?
We shift the decision point. We reduce the friction of the initial action.
So, if I'm that middle schooler, my only decision should be to walk into the room and sit in the chair.
That's it.
That's it. I don't commit to 3 hours. I don't even commit to 30 minutes. I just commit to opening the textbook and looking at the pictures on the page.
You are establishing the baseline physical action. You are putting on your running shoes and stepping onto the porch.
Generating that initial heat. And then once the book is open and I've read the first paragraph, which is guaranteed to feel difficult, your brain will be screaming to check your phone. You'll feel restless.
That is your 2-minute wall.
Right. That's the wall. So you do not decide, should I study or play video games? You delay the decision.
You say, I'll decide after I read page 2.
And at page 2, the choice isn't stop or go. The choice is, do I read one more page or do I read the whole chapter?
The momentum has already captured you.
It's brilliant.
This is such a liberating concept because it removes the heavy moralizing guilt we attach to feeling unmotivated.
Yes. You do not need motivation to finish a task. You only need the momentum to start the baseline action.
Motivation is actually the result of action, not the prerequisite for it.
Wow.
You engineer the start, and the continuation takes care of itself.
This proves that the strategy works conceptually. But what I love about this source material is that the author actually proves it works for a teenager practically.
Because he did exactly this when she was in middle school learning English.
Yes. The essays regarding his teenage years are incredibly rich.
They really strip away the retrospective wisdom of a successful 60-year-old corporate negotiator and show us the raw, chaotic energy of a teenager just trying to figure this out in real time.
He didn't have theories on environmental friction back then.
No, he just had a problem he desperately wanted to solve.
So let's set the scene. We're going back roughly 50 years. The author is in middle school. He's a bright kid.
Right.
He gets a perfect score on an English test, and naturally his ego inflates.
As it would?
He's feeling like he's the top of the academic food chain, but then a classic middle school inciting incident occurs.
Right. He finds out that a female classmate, whom he refers to in the text as M-San, has passed the Icon Level 4 exam.
Now, context is important here.
Yeah, the Icon is the test in practical English proficiency in Japan. Level 4 is roughly equivalent to completing second-year middle school English.
And they were only in their first or second year.
So it's a massive blow to his pride.
He thought he was the smartest kid in the room, and suddenly this external objective benchmark proves that M-San is leagues ahead of him.
It is the perfect spark. But what is critical for our listener to analyze is what he does next.
Right.
He doesn't just rely on the abstract motivation of, I want to beat M-San.
He doesn't just sit at his desk, stare at his standard issue textbook and say, I am going to try harder.
Because trying harder is a strategy that relies 100% on willpower.
Which we've already established is a faulty engine.
Precisely. Instead, he builds a system, an incredibly dense, overlapping, almost inescapable system of exposure to the English language.
He realizes that relying on his school's curriculum isn't going to cut it if he wants to leapfrog ahead.
Right. His school had actually been changing its official textbooks from a book called New Prince to Total English and eventually to Everyday English.
So what does he do? He goes out and buys the supplemental study guides, they called them training papers, for both New Prince and Everyday English.
He uses 2 completely different textbook ecosystems simultaneously.
That is intense.
This is a fascinating instinct for a middle schooler to have. From a cognitive science perspective, building redundancy into your learning is incredibly effective.
Oh, how so?
Well, seeing the exact same vocabulary word or grammar structure presented in 2 slightly different contexts forces the brain to build stronger, more adaptable neural pathways.
It's not just rote memorization.
Right, it's dimensional understanding.
He essentially doubled his exposure, but he didn't stop with text. This is where he starts outsourcing his discipline.
Yeah.
He anchors his learning to specific scheduled external events in the real world.
He starts listening to NHK radio programs.
Specifically, Zokutiso Aigo and Aigo Kaiwa.
And we really need to emphasize the historical context here. 50 years ago, there was no streaming.
No podcasts on demand.
You couldn't pause it, and you couldn't listen to it later.
Right. A radio broadcast happens at a fixed, unyielding time in the space-time continuum.
Yes. If the broadcast is at 6 p.m., you have to be in your room, sitting by the radio, dial tuned, notebook open, at 5:59 p.m.
If you miss it, that knowledge is gone forever into the ether. You cannot procrastinate a live radio broadcast.
He outsourced his discipline to the NHK broadcasting schedule.
Wow.
He didn't have to wake up and decide when to study. The radio decided for him. It was an external trigger that forced compliance.
And it wasn't just a gentle after-school hobby. He became obsessed.
He added late-night broadcasts to his routine.
Yeah, he started tuning into a program called Hayakumanen no Aigo on cultural broadcasting at 11 p.m.
He was immersing his environment so thoroughly that avoiding English would have actually been harder than studying it.
That's a great point. He even mentions writing English words in the margins of old newspapers just for fun.
Boasting to himself that he could write 150 words completely from memory.
This is the definitive difference between motivation and routinization.
Motivation is waking up, checking your internal emotional weather, and hoping you feel like studying.
Routinization is laying down a track that your low naturally runs on.
You don't need to feel like studying if the radio is already turned on at 11 p.m.
Right, but I do want to make sure we don't ignore the role of emotion entirely.
Okay.
Because you said earlier that he bypassed motivation, and that's true for the daily routine, but the spark that started all of this was deeply emotional.
It was.
It started with rivalry, the sting of M-San beating him.
Emotion is an incredibly powerful catalyst. It is just a terrible fuel source for long-term endurance.
That distinction is so important, and the essays give us an even better example of this later in his teenage years.
Oh, the 3-second romance.
Yes, this is honestly one of the most beautiful cinematic details in the entire text.
It really is. So later in high school, he develops a massive crush on a nurse at a hospital he was visiting for some joint pain.
She is 2 years older than him, a working professional, while he is just a high school kid.
He is incredibly intimidated by her.
And around this time, he is considering taking the Eichen Level 2 exam.
Which, again, for context, it was a very difficult, high-level exam for a high school student back then.
It was a massive cognitive leap. He is full of self-doubt. He doesn't know if he's ready.
He is standing at a mental precipice. The friction of the potential failure is paralyzing him. So he expresses this hesitation to the nurse.
And she looks at him, this older professional woman he has a desperate crush on, and she doesn't baby him. She
No.
doesn't say, "Oh, I'm sure you'll do your best."
She says something incredibly simple, but absolutely piercing. She says, "You won't pass if you don't take it."
In Japanese, ukakanakia, ukaraneyo.
It cuts right through his adolescent anxiety.
He writes that he felt this literal explosive energy run through his body because she spoke to him as an equal.
She challenged his courage directly.
Right. He left the hospital, went straight to the bookstore, and registered for the exam on the spot.
And yes, he passed it.
This perfectly illustrates the interplay between emotion and mechanics.
Emotion, the rivalry, the crush, the desire to impress is fantastic for initiating a behavior that requires a burst of courage.
It gets you to buy the textbook, or register for the test, or step out onto the freezing porch.
But the emotion is highly volatile.
Extremely volatile. You cannot rely on a crush on a nurse to fuel you to study complex grammar at 11 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday when you are exhausted and your joints ache.
Exactly. The emotion gets you to the starting line, but the mechanical routine runs the actual race.
So to our listener in middle school, and honestly to anyone listening who is trying to learn a new skill or build a habit, use the emotion.
Use the rivalry with the kid sitting next to you. Use the crush.
Use the desperate desire to prove someone wrong. Let that be the spark that gets you to take the first step.
But the very next day, you have to build a mechanical routine around it.
Anchor your study to a fixed time. Use overlapping resources. Build a system so deeply embedded in your daily life that you don't have to rely on that volatile emotion ever again.
Because the reality is, even with the best system in the world, the beginning of any new endeavor is rarely pleasant.
It's not.
In fact, it is usually deeply uncomfortable.
Which brings us to the reality of pain and a brilliant concept the author calls the balloon analogy. Because you're right, if you're a middle schooler sitting down to cram vocabulary or an adult trying to learn code, the beginning is agonizing.
The author actually volunteers to teach middle schoolers today,
Yeah.
specifically tutoring them in English and math.
Right.
And inevitably, a student will look up at him frustrated and ask the eternal question, why do we have to cram all this useless stuff into our heads? I'm never going to use this quadratic equation in real life. Why is this necessary?
It is the eternal cry of the student. And honestly, society struggles to answer it effectively.
We usually resort to platitudes.
Like, because it's on the test,
Or because you need it for college.
because it builds character, which are all terrible answers that do absolutely nothing to alleviate the student's frustration.
But the author provides an answer that is deeply rooted in physical reality. He recalls a memory of his father handing him a deflated balloon when he was a little boy and telling him to blow it up.
Oh man, anyone who has tried to blow up a brand new stiff rubber balloon knows exactly what this feels like.
It's so hard.
You take a huge breath, you pinch the end, and you blow. And absolutely nothing happens.
The rubber fights back.
You blow until your face is turning red, the veins in your neck are popping out, the pressure in your ears is painful.
It is incredibly hard, frustrating work. It physically hurts.
You are fighting the sheer resistance of the material.
But eventually, either you force the air in, or your father takes it and does it for you. The balloon expands, stretching the stiff rubber to its absolute limits.
Then you let the air out. It shrinks back down.
But what happens the second time you try to blow up that exact same balloon?
It's easy. The rubber is pliable. The resistance is mostly gone. It takes half the effort to fill it with air.
The author tells his students, cramming dense, difficult knowledge in middle school isn't necessarily about perfectly retaining those specific facts for the rest of your life.
It's not about remembering the exact date of a historical battle 40 years from now.
Right. It is about stretching the bag of your brain.
The initial cramming is the agonizing first breath into the stiff balloon. Your brain resists it. It feels impossible.
But once the brain's capacity is stretched, once those initial neural pathways are forced open, future learning becomes exponentially easier to absorb.
Whether it's learning a new programming language at 30 or mastering a complex hobby at 50, the balloon of your cognitive capacity has already been stretched.
This is such a profound metaphor because it acknowledges the pain without pathologizing it.
The beginning of any routine hurts. Learning a language hurts. The first 2 minutes of a run hurt.
The rubber must resist the air.
And the author shares another incredibly vivid, almost visceral story to illustrate this physical reality of perseverance.
He writes about a habit he has maintained for 40 years, massaging the soles of his own feet with a stick.
Yes, the foot massage. And we need to be clear here, this isn't some gentle, spa-like, relaxing experience.
Not at all.
He talks about using a hard stick to literally crush these lumps or knots he felt deep in the tissue of his soles.
He believed these lumps were signs of stagnation or poor health. And for the first year, an entire year, every single night for 10 minutes, it was agonizing.
Yeah.
Peer-reducing pain. He literally cried from the intensity of crushing those knots.
Okay, here is where I really need to push back, or at least play devil's advocate for modern society.
Sure.
Because today, the overwhelming message we get is, listen to your body.
Right.
If a workout hurts, stop. If a new habit causes immense friction, take a break. We are told to avoid burnout at all costs. If something hurts that much, doesn't it mean you are doing damage?
Or at the very least, shouldn't you interpret that pain as a sign that you just aren't cut out for it?
Exactly.
That is the modern trap.
Yeah.
We conflate the pain of adaptation with the pain of injury.
Okay, distinguish those for me.
Obviously, if you tear a ligament running, you stop.
Mm-hmm.
But the burning lungs at minute 2 of a run, the mental exhaustion of reading a textbook, the physical agony of massaging knotted tissue that is the pain of adaptation.
I see.
The danger of the listen to your body mantra is that our bodies naturally prefer the path of least resistance.
Right. The body wants to stay on the couch.
Exactly. When we interpret the friction of adaptation as a failure of willpower, when we say, this hurts too much, I must lack motivation, we give ourselves a moral excuse to quit.
But the author assumes the exact opposite.
He assumes that the initial phase must be painful.
The stiff balloon must resist the air. The knots in the foot must hurt when pressed.
Exactly. He doesn't view the pain as a signal that he is doing something wrong or that he lacks drive. He views it as the mechanical reality of a system-changing state.
The rubber of the balloon stretching.
Yes.
That shifts the entire paradigm of how we approach difficult things. If you're that middle schooler sitting down to study and the first 10 minutes feel like sheer agony, your brain is foggy, you feel restless, you want to jump out of your skin.
You don't say, I'm lazy, I have no motivation.
Right. You say, this is the balloon stretching. This is the 2-minute mark of the run. This is exactly what it is supposed to feel like.
You expect the pain, so you don't panic when it arrives. It removes the moral failing.
But enduring that pain, waiting for the rubber to give way, requires patience.
It does.
And patience is entirely dependent on how you experience the passage of time. If those 10 minutes of studying feel like 10 hours, You're going to quit no matter how much you know about balloons.
Which leads us into one of the most intellectually fascinating sections of his essays.
Yes, the time section.
The author dedicates a 4-part series specifically to the perception of time. Because if you are going to sustain a habit over decades, you have to understand how your brain processes the clock.
He introduces a concept called Janet's Law. Let's unpack this.
Janet's Law is named after the 19th century French philosopher Paul Janet.
Okay.
It posits a very simple mathematical reality about human perception. Our perception of time accelerates as we age because each passing year represents a continually shrinking percentage of our total life lived.
Let's give a concrete example of that.
Okay, so to a 5-year-old child, 1 year represents 20% of their entire existence.
A whole fifth of their life.
So a year feels like an absolute eternity. Summer vacation feels like a lifetime.
But to a 50-year-old, 1 year is merely 2% of their lived experience. It is a tiny fraction. So a year seems to pass in a blink.
The author gives a great real-world observation of this. He talks about watching a 15-year-old middle schooler who is dawdling, taking forever to start studying for their high school entrance exams.
No, I've seen this.
The exams are 6 months away, summer vacation is happening, and the kid is just chilling.
The parents are practically pulling their hair out with anxiety, screaming, the exams are right around the corner.
But the kid is perfectly calm.
Because they are operating on two completely different internal clocks.
Exactly. To the 15-year-old, 6 months is a massive chunk of their conscious life. The exam feels a lifetime away.
To the 45-year-old parent, 6 months is practically tomorrow afternoon.
Right.
Okay, so that explains why adults feel like time is slipping away and teenagers feel like they have all the time in the world. But how does the author use this to actually help with perseverance?
Does he just tell us to realize time is subjective?
Yeah, how does he apply it?
He goes much deeper. He synthesizes this subjective nature of time into actionable behavioral advice.
Okay.
He points out that time doesn't just change based on age. It dilates and compresses based on our emotional state in the present moment.
Right. He notes that when we look back at the past, time usually feels compressed. But when we look forward, time stretches out.
And crucially, the quality of that future time depends entirely on what we anticipate.
Oh, I see.
When we are enduring discomfort with no clear end or purpose, time drags unbearably.
Think about standing in front of a microwave when you are ravenously hungry.
Yes, watching those digits count down from 30 seconds feels like hours.
Or when the author was doing the first year of that agonizing foot massage.
The 10 minutes every night must have felt endless. Time is honest to our suffering.
But, and this is the hack, we have the power to alter this subjective experience.
You do.
When we place excitement or anticipation in the future, we elongate our subjective experience of time in a positive way.
The waiting itself becomes part of the joy.
Think about planning a vacation months in advance. The anticipation of the trip actually makes the drudgery of your daily work more bearable because you are moving towards something exciting.
This circles back perfectly to his morning run.
It does?
He didn't just decide to run for some abstract concept of health. Health is boring.
Health doesn't pull you out of bed in January.
Exactly. He placed a very specific, highly emotional point of excitement in the distant future, a date with his granddaughter in 20 years.
He wants to be the cool, vibrant, healthy 80-something grandpa taking her out.
By placing that excitement 2 decades out, he creates a massive psychological anchor. He isn't just trying to survive the daily grind of the treadmill.
Every single step he takes is a literal bridge to that specific joyful moment in the future. It pulls him forward through time.
And it recontextualizes the present pain. The cold January morning, the burning lungs at the 2-minute mark, they stop being suffering.
They become the necessary currency he is cheerfully paying to buy that future date.
It changes the internal narrative from I have to endure this to I am actively moving toward that.
That is such a powerful takeaway for our listener. If you want to persevere, you cannot just stare at your feet while you run.
You can't just stare at the textbook and think about how much you hate it.
You must deliberately place little moments of excitement in your future. It could be a massive goal 20 years away, or it could be a reward you plan for yourself at the end of the week.
But you have to put something out there to pull you forward.
Otherwise, the daily routine just feels like an endless treadmill rather than a bridge to a destination.
But even with a bridge, even with a shifted decision point, and even if you accept the pain of the balloon stretching,
There is still one massive, towering roadblock that causes almost everyone to eventually quit their routines.
Perfectionism.
The absolute killer of continuation.
Yes.
Which brings us to part 5 of our deep dive, what the author brilliantly calls the Yajirobe philosophy, accepting imperfection.
The author shares this incredibly humbling, honestly kind of comical story about trying a physical test he heard an athlete describe on television.
The premise of the test is simple, but it is deeply revealing about how we perceive our own control.
The athlete claimed that a true measure of internal body control proprioception is the ability to stand in front of a mirror with your eyes closed and raise your arms straight out to your sides so they are perfectly horizontal.
Parallel to the floor.
Right. Then you open your eyes and see how accurate your internal map is compared to physical reality.
So the author, being a relatively fit, confident guy who runs and massages his feet, thinks, no problem. I have good body awareness.
I might be off by a millimeter, but I'll basically look like a perfect human cross.
He stands in front of his mirror, closes his eyes, raises his arms, feeling very poised and controlled.
Then he opens his eyes.
And he is devastated by what he sees.
His arms are nowhere near horizontal. One is higher than the other. The angles are bizarre.
He describes himself looking like a ruined, lopsided Yajirobe.
For listeners who might not know, a yajirobe is a traditional Japanese balancing toy.
Right, it's usually made of bamboo. A little figure with long, curved arms holding weights, balancing on a central pivot point.
If you tap it, it wobbles wildly, but eventually rights itself.
He expects to look like an elite gymnast, and he opens his eyes to see this crooked, wonky bamboo toy.
The visual is funny, but the psychological blow is very real. Because he doesn't just give up.
No, he practices.
He thinks, I am a disciplined person, I will master this.
But even after weeks of training, he only progresses from a lopsided Yajirobe to, well, an ugly Y shape. He still couldn't get his arms perfectly horizontal.
He physically could not force his body into perfect alignment. And this leads to a profound psychological realization.
He realizes if I cannot even perfectly control the physical position of my own arms, something I can literally see in a mirror and measure with my eyes.
How on earth can I expect to perfectly control my internal state?
How can I expect to perfectly control my emotions, my focus, or my daily habits?
It shatters the illusion of the statue.
The statue.
Yeah, we all like to think we can be statues, rigid, perfectly disciplined, unwavering.
Right. We hold ourselves to these impossible standards.
We tell ourselves, I have decided to study for 2 hours every day, so I must execute it flawlessly forever.
And when we inevitably slip up, when we miss a day, when we get distracted, when we get angry and snap at a colleague.
Which the author openly admits he still does.
Right, when that happens, we completely spiral.
We view the imperfection as a catastrophic failure of the entire system.
Okay, let me stop you right there. Let me play devil's advocate.
Go for it.
Because if we accept that we can't control ourselves, if we say, hey, my arms are crooked, my habits are crooked, I'm just a wobbly Yajirobe.
Doesn't that just give us a massive convenient excuse to be lazy?
Doesn't it mean we can break our routines, skip the runs, skip the studying, and just shrug it off without any accountability? Like, oh, well, I'm just a bamboo toy.
It's a very natural fear that acceptance will lead to apathy.
Yeah.
But it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what he is actually arguing.
How's...
The author is making a distinction between masters and ordinary people.
Okay.
Only a true master, an elite athlete, or a Zen monk has near-perfect control. The rest of us are inherently flawed, clumsy, ordinary people.
Right.
The yajirobe does balance, it just wobbles while it does it.
So the wobble isn't the failure.
Exactly. The danger isn't the clumsiness. The danger is the intense self-hatred that follows the clumsiness.
Wow.
When a perfectionist breaks their 30-day streak of running or fails a test they studied hard for, they feel an overwhelming sense of guilt and self-loathing.
They think, I ruined the streak, I'm a failure, what's the point?
Right. And that negative emotional payload becomes associated with the habit itself. They quit running entirely to avoid feeling like a failure.
But if you adopt the Yajirobe philosophy, you expect the wobble.
You know from the outset that you are an imperfect system.
Yeah.
So when you inevitably miss a day of your routine, you don't spiral into guilt.
You don't label your core identity as a failure.
You just laugh at yourself, say, well, my arms were crooked today, I'm an imperfect yajirobe.
And you try again the next day, you forgive yourself instantly.
Self-forgiveness, paradoxically, is the ultimate engine for long-term continuation.
It completely removes the friction of guilt.
You can only sustain a decades-long habit like a 40-year nightly foot massage, or decades of running, or years of studying English if you allow yourself the grace to stumble without quitting the race entirely.
You accept the wobble and you let the toy right itself.
That is incredibly liberating.
It really is. So, circling all the way back to the core question from our middle school listener.
Yes, the big question.
Can a middle schooler replicate this decades-long perseverance? Is the secret just a magical well of motivation?
The answer is a resounding, scientifically backed no.
You do not need a magical glowing motivation center in your brain.
What you need is a toolkit of behavioral design.
You need to shift the decision point so that starting is ridiculously easy. Don't decide to run 3 miles. Decide to step onto the porch.
Don't decide to study for 3 hours. Decide to open the book and read one sentence.
You need to tie your actions to unavoidable daily schedules, just like the author did with his live radio broadcasts, completely outsourcing your discipline to the environment.
You need to accept the initial pain. Know that the first breath into the stiff balloon is going to hurt.
Know that the first 2 minutes of the run will make your lungs burn, and accept it as a mechanical reality of adaptation, not a failure of your willpower.
You need to pull yourself forward through time by placing moments of excitement and anticipation in your future.
Whether it's a date in 20 years or a reward on Friday.
And finally, when you inevitably wobble, when you miss a day or lose focus, you have to embrace the Ajiroba.
Forgive your clumsiness immediately and try again tomorrow. The wobble is part of balance.
It is a profoundly practical philosophy of living. It takes the mysticism and the moralizing out of success and replaces it with actionable, forgiving, engineerable systems.
It really does. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought, something to mull over that builds on everything we've discussed. This is pulled directly from the author's corporate experience.
Right.
In his essays on high-stakes business negotiation, he discusses a cognitive bias known as the peak end rule.
Ah, yes. The peak end rule is a fascinating psychological heuristic.
It states that human beings do not judge an experience based on the overall average of every moment.
Instead, we judge and remember an experience based almost entirely on 2 points: how we felt at its peak, the most intense moment, and how we felt at its very end.
The author applied this masterfully in corporate negotiations.
He would purposely save his best concession or his strongest, most clarifying point for the very final moments of a grueling, hours-long meeting.
Even if the meeting itself was tense, argumentative, and painful, by engineering the end to hit a high note, he ensured the opposing side left the room with a lasting positive memory of the entire interaction.
It is a highly effective way to manipulate memory encoding in the hippocampus. The end of the event disproportionately colors the memory of the whole event.
So my question to you, especially to our middle school listener, is this. Could you apply the peak end rule to your own habits?
Oh, that's a brilliant application.
We talked about reducing the friction of starting, but what if you intentionally engineered the end of your experience?
If you're studying, what if you guarantee that the very last minute of your session is spent reading something genuinely interesting or successfully solving a problem you know you can ace?
If you are running, what if you make the final 30 seconds a peaceful, triumphant walk where you listen to your favorite song?
If you intentionally manipulate the end of the experience to be joyful and rewarding, will your brain encode the memory of the activity as a joy rather than a chore?
By controlling the memory of the habit, you are essentially pre-programming the desire to repeat it tomorrow. You are manufacturing your own cravings.
Exactly. Can you engineer your own memory so efficiently that you never, ever have to rely on the myth of motivation again?
We've been taught to look for willpower, but what we found instead is a beautifully complex, highly engineerable system of environment, time, pain adaptation, and memory.
The power isn't in what you were born with.
The power is in how you build the machine. Keep building, keep wobbling, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.